Welcome back to the Chad X podcast. We got a great episode for you here today. I'm your host, Chad X, and as always, we have my co-host, Ferris. Say hi to the people, Ferris.
Hey guys.
All right, we're going to get right into it today. So our first topic is the hantavirus. I'm sure you guys have seen the news. This is all over the place. Hantavirus is actually like a category of viruses that are usually spread from rodents, rodent feces inhalation. So if you inhale like particles of rodent feces, you can get infected with them. There are hantaviruses pretty much on every major continent inhabited by rodents. But in particular, there's one in the news right now that seems to be spreading from human to human. It was initially encountered among the residents of a cruise ship that went from Antarctica back down to Argentina and then back to Europe. Some of the people on there contracted the hantavirus from rodent feces and then since have seemed to spread it to other passengers. This is something that a lot of people were saying, hey, bomb the cruise ship, completely contain it. We cannot risk another novel virus spreading out of control and infecting everybody. So this virus has, it looks to appear that based on what everybody's saying, what all the scientists are saying, it is spreading from human to human. It is not airborne yet. It seems to be either bodily fluid or extremely close contact, like skin to skin. You know, maybe you spit on your finger or something on accident and brushed it against somebody else. So it's not confirmed that it's airborne yet, but it is possible that it is going to evolve to be that way. It may be something similar to COVID, where if you're within 6 feet of someone, the moisture particles in their breath when they're speaking can infect people around you. That's probably the most likely way of method of transmissibility that's going to cause a serious issue, because this virus does have an R0 of 2.1, I believe is the number I saw, which, to keep in mind, COVID's, I believe, was like 0.4 or something similar to that, which means that in terms of how likely you are to be infected by a person who's within 6 feet of you, COVID, it was like 1 in 10. This one, it's like extremely high. It's almost guaranteed that if you're spending 15 minutes around someone within 6 feet of them and they have the virus, you're going to get it. And we saw what COVID did with a much lower level of transmissibility. So this one is definitely something to watch out for if it does prove to be as transmissible as it appears right now based on the studies we've done of the people in the cruise ships and other areas. And the lethality rate is around 30 to 40%. COVID, at its peak, had about a 3% fatality rate, which was, way too high. If 3% of the world had got it and died, then we would have had, huge issues. Luckily, that didn't happen. A lot of people never got it, and a lot of people who got it got good medical treatment and survived, so we were able to lower the lethality rate. But if that 30 to 40% fatality rate does remain on this virus, we would see some serious issues if it continued to spread. So that's an interesting situation that we're monitoring. Ferris, what are your thoughts on the whole thing?
I think the biggest issue I've ever seen is like there was like reports of some of them back to their homes, like self quarantining, which we know is, come on. Most likely these guys are not going to follow it. There's, I think, there was two of them that went to the UK. Then another one or two like that went somewhere. I think it was the US, and they passed away from it. Um, And then, like, from what I last saw, that they were in the Canary Islands, and they were self-quarantining in the Canary Islands. They were, like, had them there. I think all of them should have been there just so it can contain it properly. Um, I saw some pictures of, like, there's a lot of controversy regarding to some pictures that came out of it, and some of them were in the bus, and they were, like, they're usually older folks, and they were, like, removing their masks and whatnot, like, it kind of, a lot of younger generation kind of saw that as like a big slap in their face. Like, oh, we're supposed to care so much about helping you guys, but you guys don't even care. But like, making a place better. So it's a lot of like controversy going on regarding to it.
Yeah,
Let's see.
definitely. I mean, that is, the core thesis of why this is such a core topic for our podcast to discuss is that we are always, advocating for the youth against the gerontocracy, against the old people dominated institutions that we have advocating for their benefit against ours. And it looks like this is another case of that. The most of the residents of this cruise ship were people in their 50s, 60s, possibly even older. So they were people who were well established in life and their careers, had the money to afford this type of cruise ship. And a lot of people are looking at it as, a wealth thing. These are wealthy people who could afford this and are willing to put the rest of us at risk. But we cannot really separate wealth from age in our current environment. Older people have more money and more resources, and it appears a greater disregard for humanity. Something's gone on with this current crop of old people where they do not feel as if they are, you know, commanded by societal rules, by obligation to help those around them and to make the world better for the next generation. If anything, they feel as if they can borrow from the future to make sure their lives are as pleasant as possible now. And this hantavirus situation seems to be one of that. I mean, there was one guy who had to be forcibly detained by the police in one of the European countries he was visiting because he was a known hantavirus recipient. He was someone who could take it and transfer the virus to other people. Even though he felt asymptomatic, he was still going out to restaurants and nightclubs and things like that. And he was in his 60s and had to be forcibly detained by the police. That's not a sign of a healthy society. You know, if he isn't willing to self-quarantine, self-isolate, or even just willingly go into custody once he's told to, the fact that he had to be fought by the police to be restrained, that's just proof that this generation of older people, of seniors, are not looking out for the best interests of society around them and are not trying to make the world a better place upon their passing. They're just trying to maximize the amount of pleasure they can get out of life right now. It's a very hedonistic way to live. Any final thoughts,
Yeah.
Ferris?
The only final thoughts I have is just like I'm really hoping these guys like get quarantined properly and that stuff stops spreading. I don't believe it's gonna spread like COVID, but at the same time, like I don't want it to get close to a point like that. Is you got to get these older folks to fully understand that like the world doesn't revolve around them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't have to see a million deaths for it to be a tragedy. If one country
Mhm.
got like an endemic, hantavirus human to human transmission thing going, and we saw, I don't know, 5,000 people in Spain die, that's still a tragedy. That's still a preventable tragedy since we're catching it when it's only about 40 people who are infected with it right now. So, all in all, I would say this is sort of a failure of institutions to take this threat seriously. We've done this before. Ebola, famously, we were able to clamp down
Mhm.
on that. SARS, the original SARS outbreak in Southeast Asia, we were able to clamp down on. COVID was the one time it got out of control, and people can't forget it. It broke a lot of people's minds how things had to go with quarantines and things of that nature. So we don't want that to happen again. But it requires people being, willing to look beyond just themselves, willing to be unselfish for a moment and separate themselves from society. And we may be at the worst point in human history for people to have that mentality and do those things. Oh well. Speaking of old men with a lot of power who don't care about anybody else, we recently had a meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. This was really hyped up to be a huge meeting where the fate of the world, it looked like, was going to be discussed. And I mean, they were saying China was going to invest $1 trillion worth of investments in American manufacturing. That's what Donald Trump was saying. But now that we're in the wake of it, it looks like things went a little differently. Ferris, go ahead and tell us what you observed, and then I'll follow up.
Um, so with the big meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping, I saw a lot of interesting things that like to me it shows that like the way the dynamics in like the league conversation. It seems to me that like China's future is in the right direction. Um, they did a lot of quote unquote deals supposedly. Trump wanted to basically kind of like ask him I guess, try to get Xi Jinping to kind of like stop his support of Iran, which is not going to happen. I don't believe so. Um, and one big topic of discussion that was really talked about was Taiwan, and even Trump came out and said that. He said that like I think Xi Jinping asked Trump regarding to like Taiwan, said, are you if we go after it, are you guys gonna go defend it?" And Trump's response is, "I don't want to talk about that right now. I don't want to talk about it right now." Which is I'm like, okay, it signals a couple of things that like the potential future invasion of Taiwan might happen very soon. That's one thing. And second is I think okay, so we've seen a lot of tech billionaires, some of the top ones in the world came with Trump at the Air Force One to China. They're also trying to get a lot of deals, especially with mineral rights, and of course trying to get more wealthy. So it was a very interesting meeting. It was like the U.S. the U.S. Government with some of its biggest oligarchs coming to go a meeting with the future potential biggest economy in the world.
Yeah, America felt very Russian in this meeting, bringing a lot of
Mhm,
rich businessmen instead of diplomats. So, kind of showing
mhm,
who's running things right now. I mean, Donald Trump himself is one of the billionaire oligarchs of this country. If
mhm.
you want to, say that we're in that new era, the oligarchy era instead of the democracy era. It was interesting. A lot of people are saying this is a further sign that we're heading towards a spheres of influence multipolar order, and that they believe, a lot of the observers I watched say that they believe this may have been covertly a deal between China and the U.S. in the sense that it looks like Donald Trump is preparing for an invasion of Cuba. We've been doing a blockade for decades. They're running low on fuel. They're running low on food. Things are getting very dire for the Cuban people and especially the Cuban government. It's been, an interest of different administrations throughout American government history to try to take the Castro regime out. Right now, Raul Castro is technically not the head of the state, but he's the last of the Castro brothers that's still alive. So you may see a Maduro-like operation where they extract him as like a symbolic victory, then leave the current regime in place and just say, hey, don't get mad about this. Don't try to fight us. You guys can still run things the way you have been. We just need to take a figurehead out. And Raul Castro may be that person since, Fidel's gone and all the others are gone.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are saying this meeting may have been an attempt by Donald Trump to get approval of that with China, maybe to make a trade saying, hey, you guys get Taiwan, we get Venezuela, Cuba, and all these other socialist regimes in our side of the world. So we may be seeing a clear divide where America is, as much as the war in Iran has shown that America still thinks of itself as a global superpower able to go out there and influence any region it wants to, the apparent failures we're getting from that may show that America is reconsidering, and some of the minds who are more aware of the situation we're in within the Trump administration may be saying, all right, well, we're going to refocus on the Western Hemisphere, things here at home, Cuba, Venezuela. We're going to continue to bully them and show that we're the top dog in this half of the world, and we're going to let the Chinese get that part of Asia, and we're probably going to have to redefine who's in control of the Middle East. They would probably hope for Israel to become out because kind of the preeminent power, but it is looking like Iran may be able to negotiate some type of settlement with other states in the region where it becomes a regional power, depending on how well they can survive this. I mean, I saw a stat the other day that said 90% of their missile munitions are still intact, even after the United States has been bombarding them and trying to destroy them. So their tunnel system for hiding their missile launchers has been very effective. In addition, they continue to pump more out. They have a great deal with China where they're getting supplies in exchange for letting some oil tankers through. So their funding has not been as damaged. They have a decentralized leadership now where each commander of their Revolutionary Guard in each region has sort of full autonomy. So after the war, we may see some issues where there's a little bit of warlordism, there's a little bit of regional vying for power to see who really gets to be the top dog, or they may put it all aside and come out more unified than before. Either way, it's looking like they're not going to be diminished as a regional power. If anything, they may be strengthened, and Israel may be weakened by this. As I don't know if any of you have seen some of the videos from the Israeli ground invasion of Lebanon, but drone warfare is brutal. We've seen a lot of it in Ukraine, a lot of it in Russia. The Israelis are not having a good time trying to fight against Hezbollah's drones. They are really, really facing a lot of casualties in that region. They have not advanced as much as they wanted to. They wanted to claim a lot of territory from them and from Syria and from just all their neighbors in general. They've been really trying to expand their imperial ambitions, but the Lebanese military, specifically some of the militias under Hezbollah, have been utilizing Ukrainian-style drone warfare effectively and stopping their advances. So we're getting a bit of a stalemate there, which is what I'm sure that's not what Israel hoped for. They wanted a really quick invasion. So all in all, it looks like the world is dividing into more and more regions of influence with regional powers. And some of the forces we thought may come out on top as the grand powers of their region. Like, people really thought Israel was going to be a huge power in the Middle East because they had taken a lot of victories in recent years. It's looking like the world order may be changing too quickly for that to be the case. If anybody can have, flying IEDs, they can have, a makeshift air force of drones for a couple $1,000s, then it's hard to establish yourself as a dominant superpower when, for the past, almost 100 years, having access to a high-quality air force able to drop bombs and, provide air support and launch missiles from fighter jets, those have been the ways to establish yourself as a supreme power. If that is no longer the way forward, and everybody's been buying American and Russian equipment for the past, 60 years, or getting leftovers donated to them for their alliance and their willingness to be subservient to the great powers, then who knows what we're going to see in the future. The one force, the one nation that I think is going to come out way ahead, like you said, is China. That is a huge advantage they have, in that a lot of drone manufacturing requires inputs from them. They are the greatest industrial power in the world right now, and their ability to produce drone parts for these militias around the world is something that definitely is going to make a lot of people want to be closer and endeared to the Chinese government.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, so ultimately, we're going to move into our final section here where we discuss our final thoughts and project what we think is going to happen in the future. We kind of did a little bit of that now with what we just discussed,
Yeah.
but in particular, I want to discuss the Iranian regime, and then Ferris wants to tell us a little bit about what he thinks is going to happen in terms of global economics and who's going to be the most powerful economies in the world. I'll start with Iran. I think the Strait of Hormuz closure is very likely to end at some point within the year, but I think the damage has already been done. So we saw global oil trade get completely disrupted for several months. The stock market hasn't reacted, and even the oil futures markets are only starting to react. But the real issue is in the fertilizer market. So if you've been tracking agricultural inputs and what farmers are saying all throughout the US and some other regions, but I'm mainly focused on the US because it's where I live, we are currently in the midst of one of the greatest droughts in American history. So it's the largest shortage in rainfall and in access to water that we've seen since the Dust Bowl in the 1930s. Which, if anybody's aware of American history, the Dust Bowl was a period where the soil was so depleted and so dry that literally people were unable to plant crops at all and grow anything in a vast swath of America, sort of in the region around Oklahoma, famously, but all the way up to Kansas. So there was a huge stretch of America where the soil was so depleted it turned into dust and storms would come blow it up, and you couldn't plant anything and you couldn't eat anything and people were starving. It was one of the worst periods. It coincided with the Great Depression, just a tragic period in American history. And if we're heading back towards that, where we're going to get a 1970s style oil shock, as well as a severe drought and a lack of fertilizer, where the current basis of all nitrogen fixing and fertilizing that we use to grow all our crops requires ammonia, which is a byproduct of natural gas shipments and other petroleum based fertilizers that we use. If we're not able to fertilize the plants, if we're not able to water the plants, if we're not able to grow the plants and eat them, we're going to face a real shortage in food and possibly a famine. Now, America's more well insulated against this than a lot of other regions because we can, in the global market for food, compete. We can throw more money at the problem and just buy it up, and I don't think we're going to see a large amount of American citizens starving. We may see a lot of people who are more food insecure. The diets may become more restricted. We're a very meat heavy country. We eat more meat than I think anywhere else on earth, so we may see a lot of people getting a little more vegetarian with their meal choices. But ultimately, I don't think we're going to see starvation in America. The countries I'm really worried about are those in sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East, who are almost completely reliant either on fertilizer imports in the case of sub-Saharan Africa or on food imports overall, such as in the Middle East, where they've historically gotten a lot of their grain from Russia and Ukraine, and a lot of their other foods from America and other regions around the world. So now that we're going to see food shortages in a lot of the regions and a lot of competition in the few food stocks remaining that'll be transported internationally, I think we could see some real issues with poor people in those countries not even being able to buy food, no matter how much they're willing to spend. Your thoughts, Ferris?
So, I like that you explained it. That you gave a good explanation. I think you're right. For my thoughts personally, I'm looking at the economic superpower that they already are an economic superpower, but they're gonna be the economic superpower in the next 10 to 20 years, in my personal opinion. I think everything that's going on right now has helped the decline in the United States, and it's making China getting stronger and stronger. China's win is if there's any country that's winning out of all this, it's China. Why do I say that? Uh, in regards to the United States, we've pushed away some of our allies, and they've went to China for these resources that we aren't provided. That they've been pushed away from the United States. Prime example, Canada. Um, they've also looked at what's it called? They're also getting you said like you said earlier, we're going to the drones. They're getting the materials they need from China. Um, China has the raw earth minerals. They have a lot of things that's economically that's just they're gonna have a big like control over that in the world in the future. They're just playing it very smart. That's what I say. I think they're playing extremely smart. And it kind of reminds me of a famous quote from Napoleon Bonaparte. He said in regard to China, it was like that's a sleeping, basically a sleeping giant. He's like, you do not want to wake, make sure that thing wakes up. And right now, we're seeing China's been waking up for a while, and yeah, they're playing the patient game, as their own officials say. Um, China's been here for thousands of years. We don't care. It's gonna be here for another 1,000 years. They're just like playing the waiting game. They're playing the long game. So I think it's very fascinating to see their developments. Uh, I even had a private discussion with Chad one time regarding to this, how like in the past 20 years, China, past 25 years since the start of this decade, China has not even decade. I mean, this is 25 years.
Century.
China, because yes, China essentially yes, China itself looked so much different when I was a kid to what it is now. So different, and I'm like, the investments that they're making towards their own country and the way they're rapidly accelerating economically, that's I truly believe it's gonna be the world superpower. So I think that's my prediction for today. I think people better be careful because they're just getting more powerful. And right now they're showing the world like they're not really involved in anything right now. They're just like chilling. They're just waiting. They're seeing the other big superpowers fighting it out and whatnot, and they're gonna get weaker, and that's when they're gonna be up top.
Yeah, looks like we might be in an era where we're transitioning from being ruled by old people to being ruled by the oldest countries. It's going to be interesting to
Yep.
watch. So I
Agreed.
appreciate that. Everybody in the comments, go ahead and let me know what was your favorite part of the discussion and what predictions do you have for the future? Do you agree or disagree with my conclusion that we may be facing global famine and real competition for foods in the international marketplace? And do you agree or disagree with Ferris that China is on a trajectory to take over as the sole economic superpower in the world within the next 10 to 20 years? Also, while you're down there, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you
Mhm.
for being a listener of the Chat X podcast. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.